Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, Islamist militants in Iraq post graphic photos set to show the massacre of hundreds of Iraqi soldiers as the country descends further into chaos. President Park Geun-hye embarks on a 6-day trip to Central Asia for Eurasia initiative aimed at boosting economic cooperation with the region. Plus, there were no major surprises as Argentina, Switzerland, and France all secure wins in their opening World Cup games. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Monday, June 16th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime, President Park Geun-hye has, within the last hour or so, departed for a week-long visit to Central Asia.
The president will seek more business opportunities in the energy-rich region and promote her Eurasia Energy and Infrastructure Initiative. Our Choi You-sun gives us a preview of the presidential trip.
President Park embarks on state visits to Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan this week.
The president looks forward to enhancing cooperation with the Central Asian countries by expanding Korean businesses' economic projects in the region and reaffirming trust and ties with the heads of visiting nations.
In Tashkent, the Korean president and her Uzbek counterpart will seek ways to bolster their strategic partnership. There are currently some $8 billion worth of joint projects underway, such as a gas field development and chemical complex construction, and Seoul hopes to go beyond into areas of renewable energy and textiles. President Park, who has proposed an initiative that will link energy and infrastructure in Eurasia, will also visit Samarkand, a city that was at the heart of the Silk Road. In Astana, the Korean leader and her Kazakh counterpart will discuss current projects worth roughly $10 billion, including construction of a thermal plant and petrochemical complex. Seoul will sign a deal to participate in Astana's rail development, with hopes it will lay the groundwork for President Park's Eurasia initiative. There will be talks on the North Korean nuclear issue, since Kazakhstan achieved significant growth after voluntarily giving up its nuclear arms. President Park will be visiting Turkmenistan for the first time as a Korean leader, where she plans to ask the country to support Korean firms seeking to participate in large-scale infrastructure projects in the gas-rich nation. During her 6-day tour, the Korean president also plans to meet with ethnic Koreans living in the three countries and pledge her support for active cultural exchanges with the region. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's rival political parties are wrangling over whether to go ahead with the Prime Minister-designate Moon Chang-geuk's confirmation hearings amid the increasingly heated debate over his controversial views and comments on history. Kim Young-gil has more.
A motion calling for parliamentary confirmation of the new Prime Minister nominee, Moon Chang-geuk, will be submitted to the National Assembly on Tuesday. Once the request is filed, legislators have 20 days to vote on the appointment. The ruling Saenuri party has jumped to Moon's defense, saying he needs to be given a chance to be vetted through a confirmation hearing. Party spokesperson Park Tae-chul accused the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, or NPAD, of not giving Moon a chance.
The main opposition bloc is not even giving the nominee a chance to be questioned on stage. Not holding a confirmation hearing is anti-democratic and goes against the people's will.
The ruling party has attacked the opposition bloc, accusing it of using the controversy surrounding Moon to score political points. However, the NPAD, which has been concentrating fire on Moon's questionable comments regarding historical issues, continues to demand his withdrawal.
If Moon stays on, it will be an insult to the people, turn Korea into a pathetic nation, cast doubt on President Park's concept of a nation, and bring ridicule to the Saenuri party.
In a lecture delivered at his church a few years ago, Moon said Japan's colonization of Korea and the division of the Korean peninsula was all part of God's will. The National Assembly will hold a 3-day interpellation session starting Wednesday, signaling the start of June's extraordinary session. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The first trial for the close aides of Yoo Byung-un, the fugitive de facto owner of the sunken Seoul ferry, has begun about 2 hours ago. The trials are being held at Incheon's district court, with these eight having been indicted for embezzlement and breach of duty. According to prosecutors and court officials, the first court hearing of a close aide to Yoo, Song Bin-guk, the head of key affiliate Panda Company, was to be held on June 10th, but was postponed as more accused were indicted. Prosecutors earlier this month indicted 15 crew members tasked with the ship's navigation, 4 on homicide charges, and 2 other close aides to Yoo on corruption charges.
The Korean government says it will react if Japan waters down a historical apology for the sexual enslavement of Korean women. Japan is expected to announce the review this week. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
The Korean government will take action if Japan announces a verification that hurts the spirit of a historic apology regarding the forceful mobilization of Korean women as sex slaves. A government official on Sunday expressed Korea's stance on the matter, saying that it will present authoritative documents, both domestic and foreign, that will prove Japan responsible in the historic truth about the wartime sexual slavery issue if Japan hurts the spirit of the Kono Statement. The 1993 Kono Statement, named after Yohei Kono, the chief cabinet secretary at the time, acknowledges that the Japanese army was involved in recruiting women to serve in frontline brothels. Seoul's reaction comes after a Japanese media reports that the Abe administration will submit its verification to the National Diet soon. The Japanese government has set up a panel to verify the events leading to the historical apology. The Korean official added that the Kono Statement was drawn up after an independent investigation by the Japanese government based on on-site inquiries, official documents, and testimonies from Japanese soldiers, related officials, and victims of sexual slavery. Korea has long pressed Japan to address the grievances of victims of Japan's wartime sex slavery by offering a formal apology and providing them with compensation. Japan has refused to do so, saying the issue was resolved by a 1965 treaty. Time is running out for the 54 surviving Korean victims, whose average age is 88. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Park Geun-hye administration has made deregulation one of the cornerstones of its plan to revive the Korean economy. It stands to reason, then, that the president's pick to be her next finance minister is on the same page as her. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Finance Minister nominee Choi You-sun says one of his top priorities, if confirmed, will be to ease financial regulations. It's a pledge that falls right into the Park Geun-hye administration's drive toward deregulation in the financial sector and housing market. Choi compared the current situation in the housing market to the middle of winter, when people lack vitality and their activities dwindled to a minimum. The nominee says current regulations are not helping. Choi said they don't address the primary problems and that they were imposed years back when the market was flourishing. If approved by the National Assembly, Choi is expected to make a push to break down some of the barriers for home buyers, including those that put a limit on the amount of loans people can borrow from lenders, depending on their financial conditions.
In order to ease the burden for home buyers, I will ease loan-to-value and debt-to-income rules that are currently putting the brakes on the housing market.
Choi You-sun says the government's main focus should be on reviving the Korean economy and promoting the happiness of the people. He has so far refrained from commenting on the strengthening local currency, calling it a sensitive issue that must be dealt with more scrutiny. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now to the deepening crisis in Iraq as radical Islamist insurgents take strides towards Baghdad. They have released graphic photos of scores of executed Iraqi troops. Shin Se-min has this report.
These are images that seemingly show militants from the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, taking aim at captured Iraqi soldiers. The photos, posted on a militant website on Saturday, end with the final image showing the bodies of the captured drenched in blood after being shot. Iraq's chief military spokesman confirmed the authenticity of the photos and said the images showed around 170 Iraqi troops who had been killed. The militants claimed to have executed 1,700 Iraqi soldiers, but the government would not confirm the information. The militant forces are spreading to northwest of the country after taking over a number of key cities, including Mosul, the second largest city in the country. The Iraqi government has reinforced defenses around the capital. However, a series of explosions inside Baghdad killed over a dozen and left more than 40 injured. And according to a U.S. military official, around 150 U.S. Marines have been sent to Baghdad to help bolster security at the U.S. Embassy. Most of the staff are being evacuated to safer parts of Iraq or to neighboring Jordan. U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel ordered the USS George H.W. Bush to the Persian Gulf on Saturday, raising the possibility of imminent U.S. airstrikes. U.S. President Barack Obama, however, said on Friday that any strike in Iraq will have to be coordinated with a thorough plan from Iraq's political leaders to set aside their sectarian differences. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And as the violence in Iraq intensifies, the world is worried not only about the fate of the country, but also about global oil prices. Instability in the nation stands to affect global supplies and raise prices as it's already begun. Our Connie Lee has more.
The worsening crisis in Iraq is causing concerns in the international community about oil output and oil prices. At production of about 3.3 million barrels a day, Iraq is the world's second biggest oil producer, after Saudi Arabia, in the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. And according to the International Energy Agency, the country accounts for roughly 4% of global oil production. Making matters worse, OPEC says that global consumption will increase sharply in the last quarter of 2014. And the organization plans to produce more to meet demands. Worries of a civil war breaking out in Iraq have startled markets and pushed the international benchmark to a 3-month high above $110 a barrel.
We are still very sensitive what goes on in the Middle East. There's no question that spills over, and that's reflected in the Brent price usually. And it's a global market, so everything is interrelated. So what goes on there affects us also.
Surging oil prices could also have an impact on Korea. According to the Korea National Oil Corporation, Iraq is the nation's 5th largest oil supplier, making up nearly 8% of its imports. The 100 or so Korean companies operating in Iraq are watching the turn of events closely. An emergency meeting in Seoul on Sunday, attended by the Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy, and officials from state-run and private sector firms, concluded that Korean companies in Iraq have not yet been affected by the unrest. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Well, it was an extremely exciting day for football fans across the world as 3 more matches took place earlier today in the group stage round.
That's right. And to get an update on the results from today and more from the 2014 Brazil World Cup, we now connect with our SJ Lee. Good afternoon, SJ.
Good afternoon, guys. Now, just like we said, we will continue on with our 2014 Brazil World Cup coverage as, like you said, 3 matches did take place earlier on today, including some close and exciting matches. So let's take a look at the highlights. Of course, taking a look here, quite an exciting match here. Ecuador versus Switzerland, as Ecuador drew first blood in the 22nd minute of the match as Iner Valencia found the back of the net, giving Ecuador the early 1-0 lead. But thanks to some second-half goals from Switzerland, including Haris Seferovic, in the 90th plus 3 minutes helped Switzerland take 3 points with a 2-1 victory. Meanwhile, France taking on Honduras. France just dominating the entire match, beating Honduras 3-0 thanks to Karim Benzema, who scores twice, including a penalty. And of course, last but not least, Argentina versus Bosnia-Herzegovina. Argentina up 1-0 thanks to an own goal early on, but Lionel Messi scores a brilliant goal in the second half. Now, Argentina does give up a goal late in the match, but still holds on to win it 2-1. Now, quite a weekend in Brazil as fans saw some amazing finishes, including the monster upsets like Spain's 5-1 loss to the Netherlands, but Let's now take a look at some other wild finishes over the weekend. Of course, taking a look at here, first off, we start off with Colombia. Now, even without their star footballer Falcao on the team, they're still able to demolish the Greek defense, easily taking the match 3-0 in their Group C matchup. But not the same way with Uruguay, who struggled against Costa Rica without the presence of Luis Suarez, as Costa Rica looks to be the dark horse in Group D's Group of Death after beating Uruguay 3-1, despite being down 1-0 early on. Then, of course, the big matchup a lot of fans were looking forward to was the Italy-England match, where both sides went back and forth until Mario Balotelli gave Italy the 2-1 victory over England, as Wayne Rooney continues to struggle during the World Cup. And last but not least, Japan, despite being up 1-0 early on against Ivory Coast, failed to hang on as Didier Drogba changed up the pace of the match as he came in as the Elephants rallied to win this one 2-1. And now moving over to the upcoming Korea-Russia match set to take place in a few days. And of course, with the referee for the upcoming match all set, both nations might need to be a little cautious during the 90 minutes of play. Now, Nestor Pitana, who became a FIFA referee starting in 2010, will be calling his first World Cup match in the Korea-Russia match later this week. However, it seems like both nations will have to be a bit cautious during this match, as the 39-year-old referee is known to give out a lot of cards. In the 4 World Cup qualification matches he was a part of, he gave out a total of 24 yellow cards. But not only that, in the Argentinian league, he gave out a total of 138 yellow cards in 26 matches, averaging more than 6 cards per match. Meanwhile, Group H matchup between Korea and Russia will take place Tuesday, 7 p.m. local time. And now moving over to the Belgium national football team this time, another team that Team Korea will face off in their group stage matches. And it seems like injuries continue to be a problem for them going into their first match against Algeria. Now, Belgium, who already had an injury scare when Romelu Lukaku hurt himself during their tune-up match against Tunisia, saw 2 more players get injured during practice, as Divock Origi and Kevin De Bruyne went to the hospital after getting hurt. Now, both players injured their ankle after colliding with their teammates during training, but the team stated that they should be okay before their first match. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Now, for all the excitement, stress and disappointment at the World Cup, sometimes it's just nice to sit back and look at the numbers, and there are plenty of those to keep an eye on in Brazil.
Right, from the players with the most goals in World Cup history to the country that can boast the most appearances, Arirang News' Judy Ann tells us more.
It's every soccer player's dream to play in the World Cup, the most viewed sporting event in the world. Now, there was one player that played a staggering 25 matches in the World Cup, and that's German midfielder Lothar Matthäus. The German legend with the most appearances in the World Cup took part in each one of them between 1982 and 1998. Now, when it comes to Korea, Park Ji-sung is the country's unforgettable hero. Park scored the winning goal against Portugal at the 2002 World Cup at the age of just 21, making him the youngest Korean player to score a goal at a World Cup finals. Now, if there was a perfect attendance award given out for the World Cup, it would go to Brazil. Brazil is the only nation to have appeared in all 20 World Cups. The soccer mad nation has also picked up the trophy a record 5 times. Now, Brazilian striker Ronaldo holds the record for the most number of goals scored, amassing 15 in 3 tournaments. Since his last World Cup in 2006, Ronaldo's record remains untouched, but that could change over the next month, as Germany's Miroslav Klose is just 1 goal behind. Now, soccer balls in previous World Cups have been criticized for being erratic. Now, this bazooka, the official ball for this year's tournament, is made up of just 6 panels, the smallest number of panels used for a soccer ball ever. Now, with fewer stitches needed, experts are calling it the most stable and accurate ball ever. That does it for a look at the World Cups in numbers.
Now, time to look through some of the other international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center.
Eunice, let's begin with the continuing crisis in Ukraine. Kiev is facing a deadline on its gas bill that's due to expire in a mere hours.
That's right, Jinju. Russia's Gazprom reaffirmed Ukraine has about 3 hours from now to make its overdue payment of nearly $2 billion or face an energy shutoff. This looks to be a highly likely scenario as the EU brokered gas pricing talks ended without a solution earlier this morning. Gazprom said it will switch to an advanced payment system if Kiev does not come current on its back dues. Meanwhile, NATO has released satellite images that appear to support Kiev's claims last week that Russian tanks had entered Ukrainian territory. A NATO official explained the first picture, dated May 30th, shows a Russian staging area in a border region with dozens of armored vehicles, but no tanks. A full week later, the second picture you see on the center there shows most of those vehicles gone, possibly a result of a Russian pullback of forces there. And the third picture shows 10 battle tanks in place, dated last Wednesday, one day before Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko accused Moscow of allowing tanks to cross into Ukraine. Afghanistan has wrapped its second round of presidential elections in what would be the country's first democratic transfer of power in its history. And as votes were being tallied, the camps of both candidates are saying by their count, they are leading. In the running to succeed President Hamid Karzai are Abdullah Abdullah, a former foreign minister and the clear frontrunner in the first round of the polls, and former World Bank economist Ashraf Ghani. The vote was held in the midst of Taliban violence that killed more than 60 and injured dozens of others. Election authorities say 7 million Afghans came out to vote by an early count. And in a developing story, the European Union will partner with Korea to realize an even faster mobile network, the so-called 5G. The Wall Street Journal reports the major joint effort is set to be announced on this Monday, with the goal of reaching a united vision by the end of next year. The EU had been lagging in mobile technology since its heyday of the 90s, when it led the industry with the GSM standard. Korea is famous for being one of the most wired countries in the world, with a mobile penetration rate of more than 100%. The race for 5G is already on. China and its Huawei Technologies has committed to investing hundreds of millions of dollars to this end. The Seoul government in January had forecast it would devote more than $1.5 billion over the next 7 years toward realizing a 5G network.
Great afternoon. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your weather updates. The whole nation should have a partly cloudy day, but the southern regions should notice even more clouds rolling in as the day goes on. And the highs for today should be slightly lower due to the cloud coverage, but temperature should be still on the warm side. And here in Seoul, the daytime high will be topping out at 29 degrees Celsius in the afternoon. And the remainder of the week looks like it holds more of the same, with increasing temperatures and a fair amount of sunshine. No showers are in store for the capital here in Seoul, but a monsoonal front will approach Jeju on Tuesday, which is tomorrow, and the southern coast will be affected by it later in the week. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul will rise to 29, while Daegu tops out at 31, and Gwangju and Busan should climb to 28 and 26 respectively later in the afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju should see a high of 23, and Daejeon and Dokdo will reach 28 and 26, while Mount Keungang tops out at 20. Well, that's all for me today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and let's send it back to Mark and Jinju in the studio.
Well, thank you very much for the weather there, Jian, and those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.